In the second episode of the main series, I explored the surprising link between Bitcoin's enigmatic creator and a religion that started in ancient Iran more than 3,500 years ago. If you haven't watched it yet, you should. I'll put a link to it down in the description of the video, and while you're down there, please take a minute to hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Iran and Bitcoin are back in the news this week, although for a completely different reason. One that you may find, shall I say, illuminating. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm your host, and this is Loose Threads, a sub-series of The Unified Theory.
As previously announced by the President, we are announcing additional sanctions against the Iranian regime as a result of the attack on U.S. and allied troops. First, the President is issuing an executive order authorizing the imposition of additional sanctions against any individual owning, operating, trading with, or assisting sectors of the Iranian economy, including construction, manufacturing, textiles, and mining.
On January 10, 2020, then Secretary of the Treasury Steve Mnuchin and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced that the United States would be tightening sanctions against Iran in response to military actions targeting U.S. forces in the region, increased funding to radical Islamic militants, threats of violence aimed at U.S. embassies in the Middle East, and the targeted killing of more than 1,500 Iranian dissidents critical of the Iranian regime. In his statement, Mnuchin specifically mentions that this new round of sanctions is aimed at any individual owning, operating, trading with, or assisting sectors of the Iranian economy, including construction, textiles, manufacturing, and mining. And keep that last part in mind as we press forward. U.S. sanctions against Iran aren't anything new, and the United States has been levying sanctions to a greater or lesser degree against the Islamic State almost continually since the 1970s. They're generally aimed at restricting Iranian oil exports and, in recent years, at hindering Iran's efforts to develop nuclear weapons. In an effort to get around the economic stranglehold placed on them by these sanctions, Iran began mining Bitcoin in earnest in late 2019, and in 2020 they passed a law requiring all miners operating within their borders to sell their Bitcoin directly to Iran's central bank. It was around this time that the Iranian regime began cracking down on these illegal or unlicensed miners. And now in 2021, it's these same small miners that are being blamed for the massive power outages all across the country. In an article by Anna Baydakova for Coindesk.com, Iran's deputy energy minister has been quoted as saying that unlicensed miners have made the country's power grid unstable, and that many mining farms are based in schools and mosques that receive electricity for free. Iranian journalist Ihsan Naruzi suggests that the list of entities taking advantage of free electricity sources to run illegal mining operations might actually be much bigger. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the Iranian version of the Special Forces, control a broad network of religious schools, mosques, and other entities that get electricity for free. And while there is no proof that all of them are mining crypto, it's likely that at least some of them are. Photos of these types of mining farms were being shared on social media as far back as 2019, and Iranian officials have shut down more than 1,600 unregistered mining farms and confiscated more than 45,000 mining devices already in 2021. So why are Iranian Bitcoin miners so keen on operating outside of the purview of Iranian authorities? After all, I can't imagine the penalties for getting caught operating an unlicensed mine are particularly pleasant under Sharia law. Well, it might have something to do with U.S. sanctions, although maybe not in the way you might expect. Since registered Bitcoin miners are licensed by and operate under the guidance of Iran's Ministry of Industry, Mines and Trade and are required to sell their Bitcoin exclusively to the Iranian central bank, I'd have to imagine that cooperating with the regime with regards to crypto mining would place the state-licensed mining pools squarely in the crosshairs of U.S. regulators, whose latest rounds of U.S. sanctions, as you'll recall, specifically target individuals engaged with Iran's construction, manufacturing, and mining sectors. And that doesn't even take into account the fact that some of the largest official Bitcoin mining operations in Iran aren't even being conducted by the Iranians. They're Chinese. One of the victims of the latest blackout-related shutdowns is a mining company that recently opened a big farm in one of the country's special economic zones. On January 14th, a couple days after a nationwide power outage, Iranian authorities temporarily shut down a mining farm in Rafsanjan Kerman province, citing the excessive burden on the power grid. The data center was certified by the authorities, according to the local news outlet Mer News, but was taken offline in order to manage power consumption in the current situation. That farm is operated by the Iran-China Investment Development Group, and Iranian and Chinese investors are building a joint 1 million terabyte data center in the Rafsanjan Special Economic Zone. And RHY isn't the only Chinese mining company in Iran. An array of firms have been active in the country for a couple of years. In August 2019, miner Lu Feng told a Chinese media outlet he'd moved 3,000 of his ASIC mining rigs to Iran to take advantage of the country's cheap electricity. And in August 2020, Chinese mining pool Lubian announced they'd be building a mining farm there as well. Now, I can't say for certain if these two things are related in any way, but it seems a little odd to me that Iran is experiencing nationwide rolling blackouts just weeks after Pakistan went through the exact same thing, and which, oddly enough, wasn't mentioned anywhere in the mainstream American media. An entire country, more than 200 million people, was without power for several days just 3 weeks ago, and there wasn't a peep about it on the news. And now the same thing's happening in Iran, crippling a giant Chinese Bitcoin mining firm and being blamed on small independent miners who just might be trying to hide their operations to keep out of the crosshairs of US regulators. Strange days indeed, my friends. Thanks so much for listening. I'm your host, and this has been The Unified Theory.